If you think family drama only happens in movies, let me tell you, sometimes real life is even juicier. Imagine this. You spent your whole life working hard, saving every penny, and finally, you buy yourself a little slice of paradise, a cozy beach house where the waves sing you to sleep and the salty breeze feels like a gentle hug. Now, picture coming home to that sanctuary, ready for a weekend of peace, only to find your own family has invaded it, and you're the one who's unwelcome. Sounds unbelievable, right? Well, that's exactly what happened to me, and what I did next. Let's just say, no one will ever forget it. Before I dive into the wildest weekend of my life, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss more jaw-dropping stories like this one. Trust me, you'll be hooked from start to finish. Now, let's rewind to the beginning. My name is Olivia, and I'm not your typical grandma. I've always been independent, a little stubborn, and fiercely protective of what's mine. After my husband passed away, I poured my heart into making our beach house a true haven, a place for family, laughter, and memories. But as you'll soon see, not everyone in my family shares my idea of respect. It was a Friday afternoon, the kind where the sun glistens on the water and the world feels full of promise. I'd packed my favorite book, a bottle of wine, and a basket of fresh strawberries. I could already taste the freedom. No chores, no obligations, just me and the ocean. As I pulled up the gravel driveway, I noticed something odd. 2 unfamiliar cars parked out front. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe it was a neighbor, or perhaps my son, Ethan, had come by to check on the place. I smiled at the thought. He'd always loved the beach as a boy. But as I walked up the steps, suitcase in hand, I heard laughter, loud, raucous, and unmistakably not my own. I opened the door, expecting a warm welcome. But instead, I was greeted by chaos. There, sprawled across my living room, was my son Ethan, his wife Harper, and their 2 children, plus Harper's sister and her family. The house was a mess, towels on the floor, sand everywhere, and the smell of burnt popcorn lingering in the air. Harper was the first to notice me. She looked me up and down, her eyes narrowing, as if I were a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. "What is this old parasite doing here?" she sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We don't have room for you." For a moment, the room went silent. Ethan looked away, embarrassed, and the kids stared at their feet. I felt a sting, but I refused to let it show. Instead, I smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made Harper's lips curl in annoyance. "Well, isn't this a surprise?" I said, my voice calm and even. "I didn't realize I needed an invitation to my own house," Harper scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "We're here for the weekend. You can come back another time. We've already settled in." I glanced around. My favorite armchair was covered in wet swimsuits, and the kitchen counter was piled high with dirty dishes. It was clear they'd made themselves more than comfortable. But instead of arguing, I simply set my suitcase down and walked to the window, gazing out at the waves. I could feel Harper's eyes burning into my back, waiting for me to protest, to beg for a place to stay. But I had other plans. You see, I've learned over the years that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, calculated, and utterly unforgettable. I decided right then and there that if Harper wanted a vacation, she was going to get one she'd never forget. The first thing I did was make myself at home. I unpacked my things, humming softly as I moved around the house. Harper tried to ignore me, but I could see her growing more agitated with every passing minute. The kids, sensing the tension, retreated to their rooms, and Ethan busied himself with his phone. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I announced that I'd be making dinner. I hope everyone likes seafood, I said cheerfully, pulling out a bag of frozen shrimp from the freezer. Harper wrinkled her nose. We were planning to order pizza, she said, her tone icy. Oh, but nothing beats a home-cooked meal, I replied, already setting pots on the stove. I could see Harper's jaw clench, but she said nothing. As I cooked, I made sure to use every pan, every utensil, and left the kitchen looking like a hurricane had passed through. When dinner was ready, I served everyone with a smile, but made sure to give Harper the smallest portion. She glared at me, but I just winked. After dinner, I announced that I'd be watching my favorite movie in the living room. It's tradition, I said, settling into my armchair. Harper tried to protest, but Ethan shushed her, clearly uncomfortable with the growing tension. I turned up the volume, letting the sound fill the house, and watched as Harper and her sister retreated to the porch, grumbling under their breath. That night, I made sure to set my alarm for 5 a.m. I tiptoed through the house, banging pots and pans as I made breakfast, singing old songs at the top of my lungs. The kids groaned. Harper stormed into the kitchen, her hair a mess. Can you keep it down? She snapped. Oh, I'm sorry, I said sweetly. I always start my mornings early. It's good for the soul. By noon, Harper was at her wits' end. She tried to take the family to the beach, but I'd already claimed the best spot with my chair and umbrella. I waved as they trudged past, their arms full of towels and snacks. When they returned, sunburned and sandy, I was waiting with a list of house rules. No shoes inside, no food in the bedrooms, and absolutely no loud music after 8 p.m. Harper's face turned red with frustration, but I just smiled. My house, my rules, I said, my voice as sweet as honey. The tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Harper tried to keep her composure, but every time she glanced my way, I could see the storm brewing behind her eyes. Ethan, ever the peacemaker, attempted to smooth things over with awkward small talk. But even he couldn't ignore the fact that the weekend was quickly spiraling out of his wife's control. I decided it was time to up the ante. After all, if Harper wanted to play hostess in my house, she'd have to play by my rules. The next morning, I woke up early again, this time to rearrange the living room furniture. I dragged the heavy coffee table across the floor, the legs screeching against the wood, and stacked the couch cushions in a corner. When Harper stumbled in, bleary-eyed and clutching her phone, she nearly tripped over the ottoman. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Just making the space more comfortable for everyone," I replied, feigning innocence. "I find the energy flows better this way." She muttered something under her breath and retreated to the kitchen, only to find that I'd already claimed the coffee pot. I poured myself a generous cup, then left the pot empty on the burner. Harper glared at me, but I just sipped my coffee and smiled. The kids, sensing the shift in power, started to gravitate toward me. I offered to teach them how to make seashell necklaces, a tradition I'd started with Ethan when he was their age. They eagerly accepted, gathering around the dining table as I laid out the supplies. Harper tried to intervene, insisting they had plans to go paddleboarding, but the children were already threading shells onto string, their laughter filling the room. Ethan watched the scene unfold, torn between loyalty to his wife and the nostalgia of his childhood. I caught his eye and gave him a reassuring nod. He smiled, a flicker of gratitude passing between us. By midday, Harper was pacing the porch, her phone pressed to her ear as she vented to her sister. I could hear snippets of their conversation, complaints about the old woman ruining their vacation, threats to pack up and leave. But I knew she wouldn't go. Harper was too proud to admit defeat, especially in front of her family. So, I decided to make things even more interesting. That afternoon, I announced that I'd be hosting a beach house etiquette seminar. I handed out handwritten invitations to everyone, including Harper's sister and her husband. The kids thought it was hilarious, but Harper's face turned a shade paler. "Is this some kind of joke?" she asked, waving the invitation in my face. "Not at all," I replied, keeping my tone light. "I just thought it would be helpful for everyone to learn how to respect someone else's home. You know, little things, like cleaning up after yourself, asking before using someone's things, and treating the owner with kindness." Harper's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. At 4 o'clock sharp, I gathered everyone in the living room and began my seminar. I spoke about the importance of gratitude, the value of family, and the simple joys of sharing space. I could see Harper squirming in her seat, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The kids giggled. Ethan looked mortified, and Harper's sister avoided my gaze. When I finished, I handed out a list of house commandments, complete with bullet points and gold stars for good behavior. The children immediately started competing for stars, tidying up their rooms, and offering to help with chores. Harper, on the other hand, sulked in the corner, her pride wounded. That evening, I decided to reclaim my kitchen. I announced that I'd be baking my famous lemon bars, a recipe passed down from my grandmother. The smell of fresh citrus and sugar soon filled the house, drawing everyone to the kitchen. Even Harper couldn't resist sneaking a taste, though she tried to hide her enjoyment. As we sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter, I could feel the atmosphere shifting. The children were happy, Ethan was relaxed, and even Harper seemed to soften, if only for a moment. But I knew better than to let my guard down. Harper was a master of the silent war, and I could sense she was plotting her next move. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke to find my suitcase missing. I searched the house, but it was nowhere to be found. When I confronted Harper, she feigned innocence, insisting she hadn't seen it. But I caught a glimpse of it through the window, tucked behind the garden shed. I marched outside, retrieved my suitcase, and brought it back inside without a word. Harper watched me, her eyes cold and calculating. I could tell she was testing me, trying to push me to my breaking point. But I refused to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I decided to turn the tables. That afternoon, I invited the neighbors over for a barbecue. Harper was livid. She'd planned a private family dinner, and now the house was filled with strangers. I introduced myself to everyone, making sure to mention that I was the owner of the beach house. The neighbors were delighted, sharing stories about the old days and complimenting my hospitality. Harper tried to regain control, but it was too late. The children were playing games in the yard. Ethan was chatting with the neighbors, and Harper's sister was helping me set the table. Harper stood alone on the porch, her arms crossed and her face stormy. As the sun set and the barbecue wound down, I gathered everyone for a group photo. I stood in the center, beaming with pride, while Harper lingered at the edge, barely smiling. When the neighbors left, I thanked them for coming and handed out leftover lemon bars. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but smile. Harper had tried to make me feel unwelcome in my own home, but I'd turned the tables and shown her what true hospitality looked like. The weekend wasn't over yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Harper would think twice before crossing me again. The next morning, the air in the house was thick with unspoken words. Harper's defeat at the barbecue had left her simmering, and I could sense she was plotting her next move. But I was ready. Years of raising a family had taught me that patience and persistence always win out over petty games. I started the day with a little mischief of my own. I woke up before dawn and took a long, luxurious shower, using up all the hot water. By the time Harper and her sister tried to get ready, only icy cold water was left. Their shrieks echoed through the house, and I couldn't help but chuckle as I sipped my coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over the waves. Ethan, ever the diplomat, tried to smooth things over at breakfast. "Maybe we could all go into town today," he suggested, glancing nervously between Harper and me. "There's that little farmer's market you love, Mom." I smiled warmly at him. "That's a wonderful idea, Ethan. I'd love to show everyone around." Harper rolled her eyes, but didn't protest. I could tell she was hoping a change of scenery would help her regain control. But I had other plans. As we walked through the bustling market, I made a point of introducing myself to every vendor, reminding them that I was Olivia, the owner of the beach house on the bluff. The vendors greeted me like an old friend, offering samples and sharing stories. Harper trailed behind, clearly uncomfortable with my popularity. At one stall, I bought a bouquet of fresh flowers and handed them to Harper. "For you," I said with a smile. "A little something to brighten your day." She accepted them stiffly, mumbling a thank you. The children, meanwhile, were having the time of their lives, sampling homemade jams and picking out seashell trinkets. Ethan relaxed, enjoying the rare moment of peace. But as we returned to the house, Harper's mood soured once again. She found a note taped to the front door, a reminder from the neighbors about the community beach cleanup scheduled for the next morning. I'd volunteered our family to help, of course. Harper's face fell as she read the note. "We're supposed to be on vacation," she complained, thrusting the note at me. I shrugged. "It's important to give back to the community. Besides, it'll be fun. The kids will love it." That evening, I decided to host a family game night. I pulled out old board games from the closet, ones Ethan and I used to play when he was a boy. The children were thrilled, and even Harper's sister joined in. Harper, however, sat on the sidelines, scrolling through her phone and sighing dramatically. As the night wore on, the laughter grew louder, and the tension began to melt away. For a brief moment, it felt like old times, before the grudges, before the power struggles. I caught Ethan's eye and saw a glimmer of gratitude. He mouthed a silent thank you, and I nodded, understanding all that went unsaid. But Harper wasn't ready to surrender. The next morning, she tried to sabotage the beach cleanup by accidentally sleeping in. I let her rest, taking the kids and Ethan down to the shore. We spent the morning picking up litter, chatting with neighbors, and enjoying the sunshine. The children beamed with pride as they filled their bags, and Ethan seemed genuinely happy. When we returned, Harper was waiting, her arms crossed and her expression sour. "You left without me," she accused. I smiled sweetly. "We didn't want to wake you. You looked so peaceful." She huffed and stormed off, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I could hear her on the phone, complaining to her mother about how I was ruining everything. But I didn't let it bother me. I knew I was winning, one small victory at a time. That afternoon, I decided to take things up a notch. I announced that I'd be teaching the children how to make my famous sandcastle cookies, a recipe that required teamwork, patience, and a little bit of magic. The kids eagerly gathered in the kitchen, flour dusting their noses and laughter ringing through the house. Harper tried to intervene, insisting they had other plans, but the children were already elbow-deep in dough. Ethan joined in, rolling out the cookies and sneaking bites when he thought I wasn't looking. Even Harper's sister couldn't resist, offering to help decorate the finished treats. As the cookies baked, the sweet smell filled the house, drawing Harper out of her self-imposed exile. She hovered in the doorway, watching as her family laughed and worked together. For a moment, I saw something soften in her eyes, a flicker of longing, perhaps, or maybe just hunger for a fresh cookie. I offered her one, still warm from the oven. She hesitated, then took it, nibbling at the edge. "It's good," she admitted quietly. "Thank you," I replied, my tone gentle. You know, Harper, this house was always meant to be a place for family. I just wish we could all enjoy it together, parenthetically. She didn't respond, but she didn't walk away either. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. That evening, as the sun set and the sky blazed with color, I gathered everyone on the porch for a bonfire. We roasted marshmallows, told stories, and watched the stars appear one by one. For the first time all weekend, there was a sense of peace. A fragile truce, perhaps, but peace all the same. As I watched my family gathered around the fire, I felt a surge of pride. I'd stood my ground, refused to be bullied, and reminded everyone, especially Harper, that this house was my sanctuary. But I also realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't about winning or losing. It's about showing grace under pressure and teaching others the true meaning of family. Still, I knew Harper well enough to sense that the battle wasn't over. She was too proud, too stubborn to let things end on my terms. And as the embers of the fire glowed in the darkness, I prepared myself for whatever she might throw at me next. The next morning, the air was heavy with anticipation. I could feel it in the way Harper moved around the kitchen, her steps sharp and deliberate, her eyes darting to me every few minutes. She was planning something, and I was determined to be ready for whatever she had in mind. After breakfast, Ethan suggested a family outing to the tide pools, a favorite spot of mine, where the rocks were slick with seaweed and tiny crabs scuttled between the crevices. The children cheered, eager for another adventure, and even Harper's sister seemed excited. Harper, however, hesitated, her lips pressed into a thin line. I think I'll stay here, she said finally, her voice cool. I have some work to catch up on. Ethan looked disappointed, but I just smiled. Suit yourself, Harper. We'll bring you back some seashells. As we left, I glanced back at the house, catching a glimpse of Harper watching us from the window. There was something calculating in her gaze, and I knew she wasn't just planning to answer a few emails. The tide pools were as beautiful as ever, the water sparkling in the morning sun. The children darted from rock to rock, squealing with delight as they discovered starfish and sea anemones. Ethan relaxed, his worries melting away as he watched his kids explore. I felt a sense of peace, but it was tinged with unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that Harper was up to something. When we returned to the house, my suspicions were confirmed. The living room was spotless, almost suspiciously so. The kitchen counters gleamed, and the floors had been freshly mopped. At first, I was impressed. Maybe Harper had finally decided to pitch in. But then I noticed something odd. My favorite vase was missing from the mantel, and the framed family photos had been rearranged. The house felt off, as if someone had tried to erase my presence. I found Harper in the backyard, lounging in a deck chair with her phone. Did you do some redecorating? I asked, keeping my tone light. She didn't look up. Just tidying up. The place was a mess. I bit back a retort. Well, I appreciate the effort, but I do like things a certain way. She shrugged, clearly uninterested in my opinion. I decided not to push the issue, but I made a mental note to check the rest of the house later. That evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, I overheard Harper on the phone again. She was speaking in hushed tones, but I caught enough to piece together her plan. She was calling a real estate agent, asking about short-term rentals in the area. My heart pounded in my chest. Was she planning to move the family out and leave me alone? Or worse, was she trying to find a way to claim the beach house for herself? I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands. After dinner, I gathered the family in the living room. I have an announcement, I said, my voice steady. I've decided to host a family talent show tomorrow night. Everyone is required to participate, no exceptions. The children erupted in cheers. Already planning their acts, Ethan looked amused, and Harper's sister seemed intrigued. Harper, however, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "A talent show?" she repeated, her tone dripping with disdain. "That's right," I replied, meeting her gaze. "It's a tradition in this house, and I expect everyone to join in." She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "No excuses, Harper. It's all in good fun." The next day was a whirlwind of preparation. The children practiced their magic tricks and dance routines. Ethan dusted off his old guitar, and Harper's sister rehearsed a stand-up comedy set. I decided to recite a poem I'd written about the beach house, a love letter to the memories we'd made there. Harper, true to form, refused to participate. She spent the day sulking in her room, emerging only for meals. But as the evening approached and the family gathered in the living room, she realized she was outnumbered. The children begged her to join in, and even Ethan pleaded with her to give it a try. Finally, with a dramatic sigh, she agreed. "Fine, I'll do something, but don't expect much." The talent show was a hit. The children's performances were adorable. Ethan's guitar playing brought back memories of summer nights on the porch. And Harper's sister had everyone in stitches with her jokes. When it was my turn, I stood in front of the family and recited my poem, my voice trembling with emotion. As I finished, I looked at Harper. "Your turn," I said, my tone gentle but firm. She hesitated, then stood up, her eyes flashing with defiance. "I'll sing," she announced, surprising everyone, including herself. Her voice was shaky at first, but as she sang, something shifted. The walls she'd built around herself began to crumble. And for the first time all weekend, I saw a glimpse of the woman Ethan had fallen in love with. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. For a moment, it felt like we'd turned a corner. The tension eased, replaced by a sense of unity. But I knew better than to let my guard down. Harper was still scheming, and I was ready for whatever came next. The applause from the talent show still echoed in the house as everyone drifted off to bed. But I stayed up, sitting quietly in the living room, thinking. Harper's performance had surprised me, but I knew it was only a temporary truce. The way she'd been on the phone, the way she'd tried to erase my presence from the house, it all pointed to something bigger. I wasn't just dealing with a petty daughter-in-law. I was facing someone who wanted to take what was mine. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices in the kitchen. I crept down the hallway and paused just out of sight, listening. Harper was talking to Ethan, her voice low and urgent. "We can't keep doing this, Ethan. Your mother is impossible. She's making this vacation miserable for everyone. I've already looked at a few rentals nearby. We could move out today and actually enjoy ourselves." Ethan sighed. "Harper, this is Mom's house. She invited us here. We can't just leave her alone." "She didn't invite us, Ethan. We invited ourselves. And now she's punishing us for it." I felt a pang of sadness, but also a surge of determination. This was my home, my sanctuary. I wasn't about to let Harper drive me out or rewrite the story of this place. If she wanted a battle, she was going to get one. After breakfast, I decided to take control of the day. "I've planned a special surprise for everyone," I announced, my voice bright and cheerful. "We're going on a scavenger hunt, teams of 2. The winners get the master bedroom for the night." The children squealed with excitement, and even Ethan looked intrigued. Harper, however, shot me a look of pure venom. She knew the master bedroom was my private retreat, the one place in the house she hadn't managed to invade. I paired up the teams, Ethan with his youngest, Harper's sister with her husband, and Harper with me. She tried to protest, but I insisted. It'll be fun, Harper. Just you and me. The hunt began, and I made sure the clues led us all over the property, under the porch, behind the garden shed, even up into the attic. Harper grumbled the entire time, but I kept my spirits high, laughing and reminiscing about old times. I could see her frustration growing with every step. As we searched for the final clue, Harper snapped, "Why are you doing this, Olivia? Why can't you just let us have a nice vacation?" I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her. "Because this is my home, Harper. I built this place with my own hands. Every corner, every memory, it's all a part of me. And I won't let anyone, not even family, treat it like a hotel." She stared at me, her eyes blazing. "You're selfish. You can't stand to share." I shook my head. "No, Harper. I love sharing, when people respect what's being shared. But you barged in, took over, and tried to push me out. That's not family. That's invasion." For a moment, she was silent. Then she turned away, muttering under her breath. We found the last clue together, but I let the children win the prize. Their laughter filled the house, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope. But Harper wasn't done. That evening, I caught her in the study, rifling through my desk drawers. She jumped when she saw me, her face flushed with guilt. "Looking for something?" I asked, my voice icy. She straightened, trying to regain her composure. "I was just looking for a pen." I walked over and closed the drawer. "You won't find what you're looking for in there, Harper. Everything important is locked away." She glared at me, but I stood my ground. "You can't keep this house forever, Olivia. Sooner or later, it'll belong to someone else." "Maybe," I replied, my voice calm, "but not today, and not to someone who doesn't respect it." The rest of the evening passed in a tense silence. The children played quietly, sensing the shift in mood. Ethan tried to keep the peace, but even he seemed exhausted by the constant battle. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Harper win, not by force, not by manipulation, and certainly not by wearing me down. If she wanted a nightmare, I'd give her one she'd never forget. The next morning, I woke up early and set my plan in motion. I called the local handyman and arranged for some urgent repairs to be done on the house. Repairs that would require the water to be shut off for the entire day. I also called the pest control company, claiming I'd seen signs of termites in the guest rooms. By noon, the house was swarming with workers, the air filled with the sound of drills and the smell of chemicals. Harper was livid. "What is going on, Olivia? We can't stay here with all this noise and mess." I shrugged, feigning innocence. "Sorry, Harper. These things can't wait. You know how it is with old houses. Always something to fix." She stormed out to the porch, her phone pressed to her ear as she frantically searched for a new place to stay. But it was peak season, and every rental in town was booked solid. The children were bored and restless. Ethan was frustrated, and Harper's sister was already packing her bags. As the sun set, the house was in chaos. Harper glared at me from across the room, her perfect vacation in ruins. I just smiled, knowing I'd finally taken back control. The chaos in the house was almost poetic. The handyman's drills echoed through the halls. Pest control workers marched in and out in hazmat suits, and the children, once so full of excitement, now sat glumly on the porch, clutching their half-packed bags. Harper paced back and forth, her phone glued to her ear, her voice rising in frustration as she argued with rental agents and pleaded for last-minute accommodations. But every call ended the same way. "Sorry, we're fully booked." Ethan tried to keep the peace, but even he was at his wit's end. Maybe we should just go home, he suggested quietly to Harper. But she shot him a look that could have curdled milk. We are not leaving. Not like this. She's doing this on purpose, Harper hissed, her eyes darting toward me. I didn't bother to deny it. I simply poured myself a glass of lemonade, sat on the porch swing, and watched the sun dip toward the horizon. The ocean breeze was cool and sweet, and for the first time all week, I felt truly at home. This was my sanctuary, and I had reclaimed it. As the workers finished up for the day, the house was left in a state of disarray. Furniture was pushed into odd corners, the water was still off, and the lingering scent of chemicals hung in the air. Harper's sister and her husband decided they'd had enough. We're heading back to the city, she announced, not even bothering to hide her relief. Thanks for everything, Olivia. She gave me a quick hug, her eyes apologetic, and ushered her family out the door. With half the invaders gone, the house felt lighter already. But Harper was still fuming, her anger simmering just below the surface. She cornered me in the kitchen, her voice low and dangerous. You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just drive us out and have this place all to yourself. I met her gaze, unflinching. I don't have to drive anyone out, Harper. People who don't respect this house always end up leaving on their own. She scoffed, but I could see the uncertainty flicker in her eyes. For the first time, she realized she was outmatched. I wasn't just a stubborn old woman. I was a force to be reckoned with. That night, as the family huddled in the living room, I made one final move. I pulled out the old family photo albums, the ones filled with pictures of Ethan as a boy, summers spent at the beach, laughter and sunburns and sandcastles. I laid them out on the coffee table and invited everyone to look through them. The children were fascinated, pointing at pictures of their father as a child, asking questions about the stories behind each photo. Ethan grew quiet, his eyes misty, as he remembered the happy times we'd shared. Even Harper, despite herself, was drawn in. She lingered over a photo of our first summer at the house, Ethan grinning with a missing tooth, me holding him close. This place means a lot to you, doesn't it? She said quietly, almost to herself. I nodded. It's more than just a house, Harper. It's our family's history. Every memory, every lesson, every moment. It's all here. And I won't let anyone take that away. For a moment, I saw something shift in her expression. Maybe it was understanding, maybe just exhaustion. But the fight seemed to drain out of her. The next morning, Harper made her decision. She packed her bags in silence, her movements slow and deliberate. Ethan helped the children gather their things, and for the first time all week, there was no argument, no tension, just a quiet resignation. As they loaded the car, Harper turned to me. You win, Olivia. Enjoy your house. I smiled, but there was no gloating in it, just relief. Take care, Harper. And remember, you're always welcome here, but only if you come with respect. She didn't reply, but I saw the message land. Ethan hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." The children waved from the back seat, their faces pressed to the window as the car pulled away. I stood on the porch, watching them disappear down the winding road. The salty breeze tugging at my hair. The house was quiet again, the only sound the distant crash of waves and the call of gulls overhead. I walked through each room, restoring things to their rightful place, breathing in the peace I'd fought so hard to reclaim. But I wasn't done yet. I sat down at my desk and wrote a letter to my lawyer, updating my will. The beach house would remain in the family, but with one ironclad condition. It could only be inherited by those who truly respected its history and the people who built it. No more entitlement, no more power plays, just love, gratitude, and the understanding that a home is more than just four walls. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I hadn't just survived Harper's invasion. I'd turned it into a lesson she'd never forget. She came for a perfect vacation, but left with a taste of her own medicine, and I, Olivia, the so-called old parasite, had proven that sometimes the best revenge is simply standing your ground and refusing to be erased. The next weekend, I invited a few old friends over. We sat on the porch, sipping lemonade and watching the sunset, the house filled with laughter and warmth once more. The beach house was mine again, not just in name, but in spirit. And as the stars blinked to life above the waves, I knew one thing for certain. No one would ever make me feel unwelcome in my own home again, not while I still had breath in my body and fire in my heart. Because this wasn't just a house, it was my legacy. And I'd fought for it, not with anger or bitterness, but with wit, wisdom, and a little bit of well-timed chaos. Harper's dream vacation had become her worst nightmare, and my sanctuary was safe once more.